Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. Patriots Against CPS Corruption invites you to attend our March for Texas Children. DFPS has failed the families of Texas. The Texas Special Committee on DFPS has also failed to hear the parents and their children. Time to make our voices heard and surround yourself with those on the same mission as you. Join us on the March for Our Children, September 21st, 2022, starting at 1 p.m. at 701 West 51st Street, Austin, Texas, 78751. I have a brand new guest. I'm proud to say I have Judge Anthony Bompiani on. He is founder at Judge Anthony Consulting, co-founder at Court Clerk. Anthony Bompiani graduated from St. Vincent College in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, earning a Bachelor's of Science degree in the field of psychology. He earned his Juris Doctor from the Duquesne University School of Law and is licensed to practice law in the state of Pennsylvania. Mr. Bompiani was elected Magisterial District Judge in District 10, 2, and 1, and began his term in January of 2016. He has previously been named to the National Trial Lawyers Top 100 Criminal Trial Attorneys and the National Trial Lawyers Top 40 Under 40 3 years in a row, as well as being featured in Forbes magazine and Men's Journal. I totally welcome you to Slam the Gavel. Judge Anthony, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Okay. I'm so
Thanks for
glad to have.
doing such a great job with my bio. It actually sounds like that I know what I'm doing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think you do, because I am so thrilled to have you on because your videos on Instagram are beyond helpful.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I wanted to show you too, Marianne. I brought something for you because it's called Slam the Gavel. I brought a gavel here and I was going to slam it for you. So,
All right. Where do you buy those?
yeah, I don't know. This one, I have like three of them and they were all three gifts. So I don't know.
Is that made of oak?
Yeah, I don't know. It looks like it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was nice. I can't remember who got me this one. But it's like it's just it was a thing when I got elected, so I figured I'd bring
Okay.
it here since it's called Slam the Gavel.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, your advice really, really helps. There was the one you did on the risk of choosing to discipline a child before a
Yeah.
custody hearing. Oh, man, I'm telling you, walking on eggshells
Yep.
for weeks prior.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a brutal situation to be in because anytime you have something going on in your life that impacts your ability to act in accordance with your values and your character and your positions on parenting, it's a tough situation, and that's exactly what a custody case can do, unfortunately.
Mhm. There seems to be a lot of hearsay at these custody hearings or
Mhm.
trials, whatever you wanna call them.
Yep.
What have you noticed that, why is this happening, and people or other attorneys feel they can just come out with something?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of my it's funny you brought that up because I almost did a video on that today. That's one of my biggest pet peeves of the family court system. And it's something that you don't really get in other areas of the law. And what that is like kind of like you said, that attorneys go into usually it happens right out of the gate in motions court or conciliation or mediation or whatever the procedure is in your jurisdiction. And the attorneys come in right out of the gate just spewing a bunch of nonsense that was told to them by their clients. And unfortunately, a lot of the times, at least a lot of the situations I have been in, I've noticed that judges allow it to happen, right?
Mhm.
And they do they're relaxed like that with good intentions, in my opinion, and that is because they always try to revert back to this best interest of the child thing, but they do it in a way that's against the laws and the rules of evidence. So
Mhm.
it always frustrated the hell out of me because one of the other areas that I practiced in when I was doing a lot of family law work was criminal court.
Mhm.
And in criminal court, I don't know if you know anything about criminal court, but criminal court is very, very law and rule based, right? You have to follow the rules. You have to follow the rules of evidence. You can't just speak out of turn at motions, and you can't just, bring up a bunch of stuff that would not be admissible based on the rules of evidence. And in my opinion, you get a lot cleaner results in those
Mhm.
other areas like criminal court. But in family court, for some reason, like people let people say whatever they want. And what happens is then it angers the other side. It muddies the waters. It makes people blow up and want to like spend more on legal fees to fight
Mhm.
it, or they then start spewing nonsense, and it just turns into this massive fight instead of being in a situation where we follow the rules. You follow the rules of admissibility, and they don't do that, and it frustrates the hell out of me. That's for sure.
Do you think uh, the abolishment of family court would help and take it back down to civil court where it was in the first place?
I don't know. I don't know if that massive step is needed just because, I think it is important to have, I don't know if it's, I would say important, but I think it's necessary to have a separate court, because I do think that it's good to have judges who focus solely on those particular issues. But the problem is I think it needs to be handled more like the other courts,
Mhm.
right? Because in civil court, it's the same way. You have a lot of rules, you have a lot of laws, and those rules and laws are always followed, right?
Mhm.
In family court, it doesn't happen as much. So I don't think it's necessarily a situation where you need to, abolish or eliminate the family courts. I just think you need to start following the rules. And I think
Mhm.
maybe, there needs to be some education going on with regard to other areas, not just the law, for the judges and the attorneys, like, you know, psychology, like what these
Mhm.
people actually go through, like domestic violence, like narcissism, a
Mhm.
lot of the stuff that's not focused on. So I think doing something like that would be more beneficial than abolishing it as a whole.
Okay, well, when I talk to parents, they're telling me that, well, even in my case, the judge and the opposing attorney were BFFs because they worked in the DA's department for years, so of course I lost. But,
Yeah.
you and then when you go to ask the judge to recuse based on this, they just refuse to recuse. Of course, you could take that to an appeal, but that would be another 6 months you won't be seeing your kid.
Yep.
You know, how do you stop the collusion?
Yeah. Well, you stop the you stop that you have to stop the collusion by there's a bunch of things involved. You have to build a strong enough case and get those elements of your case on the record so that then that kind of stuff can be more exposed.
Mhm,
Like a lot of the times when this kind of stuff happens, it's happening and the parents don't even get a chance to like go into court. And if they do go into court, nothing's on the record.
mhm, mhm,
So in order, like one of the ways that a judge is held accountable is when there's a record,
mhm,
right? If there's a record, I know when I was on the bench, when that tape's running, like that can be used by anybody.
mhm,
So that needs to be, I think, more prevalent in family court, even in motions court, because a lot of areas don't even have a court reporter there when they're in there for motions court,
mhm.
right? So I think if you know, had a good case and a good attorney and were able to show that and make sure that it was on the record to hold the judge accountable, I think that's a way to eliminate it. Are you ever going to eliminate it completely? No, you're not, because there's bad
Mm,
eggs everywhere, right?
mhm.
But I think that's a step to at least start to minimize it and start holding these people accountable.
Yeah, that's the big thing is these judges aren't holding, we'll say the offending parent accountable when they don't comply with a visitation order.
Yeah.
And then the target parent is, running to the state police and letting them know that, "Hey, this was my custody time or my visitation time,
Yeah.
and then they'll call the DA on call, who will just say, "We can't get involved because, this is a custody hearing." So the police don't do anything.
Yeah.
Do you think they should? I mean, maybe they
That's a tough thing to label, um, completely across all of the cases. And it's the reason why is because there are a lot of people that take advantage of that too,
Mhm,
right? There are a lot of people that make false allegations and then want the police to get involved in a situation where there's a false allegations. I've seen good parents actually lose custody or at least time with the child based on false allegations in situations where that happens when law enforcement will get involved, right?
mhm,
So it's not, it's not, I don't think it's necessarily that we need to force law enforcement to always get involved in cases or eliminate them from ever getting involved in cases. But I think that they need to understand that when they do, that they're also going to be brought into the case as a witness
mhm,
and, have consequences based on what they did, right?
mm,
It's the same,
mhm,
it's the same as criminal court, right? You have when you have good police work in criminal court, it can be the best thing that there is, right?
mhm.
Because you can win a case on good police work that might have other holes. Okay.
Well,
Likewise, if you have crappy police work,
yeah.
and then it's the same thing. It's the same kind of thing, right? But in family court, a lot of the times, again, and it's because a lot of the times the rules aren't followed, the records aren't established, and sometimes people can't even be in a position where they have witnesses called. So it's like all of those issues just evaporate,
Mhm,
and there's never going to be any leverage um, on either party to get to a result that is actually like a well-intentioned result. Does that make sense?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue for sure.
Well, I was advised when we were going through this to have our pew packed with people.
Yeah,
And I don't know, and it's hard to do when you have friends that work full time and
sure.
all you have is your parents. So you're you're going in, well, the other side has their side packed.
Yeah.
I mean, does that affect a judge's ruling?
I don't think generally speaking that it does. I know in any case that I have tried through my 20 plus years of experience in family court,
Mm,
I would win cases when I had the credible witnesses on the stand, right?
mhm,
The people like I might be up against a courtroom full of supporters, but if I had the three or four witnesses on the stand that were credible, and again on the record,
mhm,
but the judge has to be held accountable. I think that's a better way to look at it as far as packing. And now too, post COVID,
mhm,
a lot of times that's not allowed. A lot of times, not so much now since we're, you know, almost a year, well, what, more than 2 years removed from that, but still, it's still limited a little bit more,
mhm,
right? So I think it's more important to have good witnesses in a case. Now, granted, again, if you're in a
mhm,
family court, motions court, or conciliation or something where you're not even allowed to present witnesses, then whatever support you need as far as family members, that's fine. But I'm not sure how persuasive it is to have them there just sitting and not offering any relevant and persuasive evidence.
mhm. Now, with COVID, everyone was using Zoom. And do you think that helped people's cases? People were taping their cases.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple different things that were different about that. First off, the flexibility, obviously, with people not having to go to court. I think that was a good thing. I think for people who get incredibly nervous, that it was a good thing, because one of the things that I always teach with my students and my clients is that when you're nervous and when you're not confident and when you're stressed and nervous and anxious and everything else, it can actually it can actually impact your ability to show your true character in court,
Mm,
right? Your
mhm,
nervous laugh or nervous, hand gestures or, whatever it may be perceived by the judge as a lack of credibility or a lack of character, when in reality it's you being nervous or anxious or stressed or worried, right?
mhm,
So I think the Zoom situation minimized that a little bit. However, when you're dealing with a client, when you're dealing with a witness, whether it be a parent in the case or whoever, one of the things that is an important task for the judge is to assess credibility of that witness, and that's a lot easier to do in person than it
mhm,
is on Zoom, right? So
mhm,
for people who had witnesses on the other side, who were lying or whatever, their credibility would be much more accurately assessed in person as
mhm,
opposed to on Zoom. It's why pre-COVID, if you were going to have a witness attend via phone or Zoom or whatever, you had to get that approved ahead of time.
mhm.
And that's why. It's because it's always more beneficial theoretically to have the witness there so that the judge can assess the credibility.
No, that's true. That's, because I'm hearing from, parents saying that, they're allowed a Zoom call with their child for only 3 minutes.
Mm,
And, then they're saying that the child will not really be themselves because they know that parent is in the room behind the camera and
yep,
making sure I I mean, this is terrible.
yep, it is. It is, and the problem is a lot of that stuff, if with the wrong perspective on how things work or are working in your life and your child's life, with the wrong perspective, all of those actions can be justified by the person.
Mhm,
So the person that's there waiting, behind the, off screen while the child's having a Zoom with the other parent, that can be justified under certain circumstances,
mhm.
right? Rightfully or
Right.
wrongfully. Just likewise, the parent who's on the Zoom wanting to talk to the child in private, their reasons and desires can be justified, right?
Mhm,
Rightfully and wrongfully. That's why it's so difficult to get to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on, for judges, for evaluators, for everybody. And it's because a lot of that stuff um can be justified. Me personally, I think in any situation that it's better to have the child talking one-on-one with the parent,
mhm.
right?
Right.
I know there are concerns parents have with, abusive, narcissistic people, but if the court allows the Zoom call to happen, I'm assuming that you have already brought up those issues and the court was already privy to those issues. And then if that's the case, then you got to let the parent have private calls with the child,
Mhm.
right?
Well, I guess in theory, that would be fabulous. But
Yeah.
sometimes and I'll tell you a funny story, but I was having a conversation with my child who was 14. This is a long time ago. He's 20 now. But the father would listen in on the phone call, and then I heard the father sneeze. So
Oh,
I said,
jeez.
"God bless you."
Who
And th
you did or the
I
child did?
did, I did.
Oh, jeez.
I could hear him breathe through the, mouthpiece, so
Yeah,
yeah. What do you do? I mean, okay, so this kinda ties in with, uh, coercive control.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know how to make that stop. I don't know how to advise parents to get that to somehow
Well,
stop.
yeah, well, the appropriate way to do it, um, And saying bless you certainly isn't inappropriate, but the appropriate way to do it is to not deal with it during the call in front of the child. Again, saying bless you is nothing. That's completely acceptable, right?
Mhm,
But I'm saying like handling it, like telling them it needs to stop or telling them
mhm.
to leave or anything like that should not happen in front of the child,
Right,
right?
right.
If it's an issue, you deal with it like any other issue, and that would be once the call is over and once you're outside of the ear of the child, you try to handle it through your ex,
Mhm,
right? Conversation, preferably in text or writing or however you guys communicate. If you can't handle it through them, or you just know that it's impossible to handle it through them because of your history with that person, then you try to handle it through your attorneys.
mhm,
And if you can't handle it through your attorneys and it's that big of an issue, then you ask the court for a ruling on it and ask the court
mhm,
for help. And those are really your options in dealing with it, because otherwise you're going to be just arguing and fighting and making demands that aren't that won't stick.
mhm. Yeah, it's just a very sticky situation, and, this also you had a video where if a parent destroys a relationship with a child with the other parent, it will bite them in the ass.
Yeah.
That was excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true. I always say that our children are adults way longer in their lives and our lives than they are children, right?
Mhm,
And what does that mean? That means that all of this shit that's going on right now and stuff that's going on in your case, like they're going to see what's really happening or what happened at some
mhm,
point. So, what people perceive to be as strategic and sneaky and like they're getting a leg up in the case, they better watch out because, like you said, it's going to come back to bite you in the ass when the child's older and when the
mhm,
child realizes what's really happening, right?
mhm. Well, and also parents are telling me, everyone says, "Oh, don't worry, they'll come back when they're 18." There's no guarantees if they will come back,
Yep.
you know, um, some of these cases, and they call them, like, high conflict cases, but in reality, it's you're dealing with a high conflict personality disorder.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
And also, to tie in with that is their attorney is also a personality disorder. So, when there is a three-ring circus going on, how should a judge be handling that? How can he slap them down?
Who the attorneys or the
Yeah.
yeah, well, with the attorneys, it kind of gets back to what we were talking about when we first started this conversation, and that's forcing them to follow the rules, right? That doesn't
Mhm,
happen very often. I'll tell you a story. And it was after I started doing a lot of criminal court work, and again, which is very strict with the rules. And then I had the same day that I was in pretrial conferences for criminal court, I had a um I can't remember. I think it was a pretrial conference. It was some sort of proceeding, like not a trial, but some sort of proceeding in front of the family court judge. Same courthouse, same county, same jurisdiction, the whole thing. And one floor up. And I went upstairs to go into this other proceeding, which I think it was a pretrial conference, and the other attorney and party didn't show up. Okay.
hmm,
Now, mind you, I just left criminal court, and if that happened, there would be an arrest warrant.
mhm,
Shit would hit the fan. You'd
yeah,
risk your client going to jail, like
mhm,
the whole thing. And the judge's clerk came out and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, attorney so and so didn't have it on their calendar. They can't make it." And I was just like, "What the f? Like,
mhm,
what? Like, that's not how this works."
mhm,
And that's how it worked. That's how it went. So situations like that and situations when you're in court and you have an asshole attorney,
mhm,
you got to follow the rules.
mhm,
Like the rules are there for a reason. And again, a lot of times judges think that they don't follow the rules because they are looking in the best interest of the child, when in actuality, following the rules would be the best interest of the child,
mhm.
right? Because it holds everybody accountable. So
Mm,
I think that's the thing. I think it's just as far as keeping attorneys in line for in family court for judges. I think it's following the
mhm,
rules of evidence, the rules of procedure, the local rules of the county, and I think it's that simple.
mhm. Well, sometimes I wish they would follow the rules, but some of them, like I said, with the collusion or their personality disorder makes them so arrogant, nothing can touch them. They're like
Yeah,
Teflon, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, and that might be the case, but regardless of what their character is, if they are doing all of that within the rules of evidence and procedure and the law, then you know, it is what it is. You kind
Mhm,
of have to let that happen. But if they're not doing it within the rules and the law and procedural rules, then somebody needs to crack the whip,
mhm.
you know?
And that's kind of hard to do if someone is a pro se litigant.
Sure. Yeah, sure. But the judges need to be more aware of that in the especially in the courtroom
Mhm.
when that's going on.
And there was also another video you did on parental alienation where you said, "Sorry, not sorry." And I really like that one.
Yeah. I can't remember what the gist of it was.
That it does exist,
Yeah.
and it was beautifully said. Um, I've shared it, but a lot of people are still saying, sorry, "This is junk science. It doesn't exist." But
Yeah.
it does. It really does until you experience it.
Yeah, here's the thing, the person, and I can't remember the guy's name, but the person that created the term, and it's not even the term parental alienation, it gets confused with the actual term that this person created, and that's parental alienation syndrome,
Mhm.
right? And it was determined by the experts in the DSM-4 that parental alienation wasn't parental alienation syndrome was not a valid mental disorder, right? This is my understanding of it.
Mhm.
And what happened was certain groups and people, probably people who were being accused of parental alienation, turned that into that parental alienation is junk science and it's not real. Okay? You see what the difference is. So my whole thing is parental alienation, call it whatever you want, but a parent who is intermingling and trying to destroy the relationship between the child and the other parent for no valid reason, it's wrong. I don't care what people want to call it, how they want to control me to call it a certain thing, but it's wrong. And the only way that number one we will be able to stop people from doing that, but number two, defend good people who are wrongfully being accused of it. The
Mhm.
only way to do those two things is to talk about it.
Mhm.
We're not gonna eliminate those two travesties by acting like it doesn't exist,
Mhm.
right? It's like any crime that happens, call them what you want, but any crime, whether it be, you know, uh, drug dealing or robbery, whatever, assault, we're not gonna we're not gonna help people who have been victims of that by or people who have been wrongfully accused of it by acting like they don't exist.
Mhm.
They exist. So let's learn the elements of them and the rules and the laws, and then let's teach people how to deal with it. And it's the same thing with parental alienation. Like if you're intermingling and trying to destroy a relationship between the other parent and your child for no reason, no valid reason, that's not right. And and
Mhm.
and that needs to stop.
Right. I didn't know what that term was until it was used on me. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I s The attorney just blurted out, among
Yeah.
other things, the silver bullet of, "You're mentally ill." You know, on
Yeah.
top of adding CPS false accusations, what people do to each other, and I
Right.
don't understand why it has to be so brutal. I
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when it's like being accused of being mentally ill. You're not going to say, you know, that's not real. You're just
Mhm.
going to show them why you're not mentally ill, right?
Right,
The same with
right.
parental alienation. Just show them why how you're not alienating, you
Mhm,
know? That's my theory.
mhm. I'm sure it was difficult being a judge and seeing things that were just, you could probably see people trying to do underhanded things to each other.
All the time, yeah, for sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
and, like, did you ever have to seriously put your foot down with some of these lawyers or so?
Not so much any issues with lawyers, maybe one or two in the course of 5 years. But with people, yeah, with individuals, non-lawyers for sure.
Mhm. What were they doing? Just yelling things out or just over talking or
Yelling things out or disrespecting or like one thing my theory was always in my courtroom, like I was very understanding and very welcoming to what people had to say and hearing people out and giving people their time in court. But I was also like people needed to know that that was my courtroom.
Mhm,
Like I'm going to be very flexible. I'm going to like give people a lot of rope to say what they feel like they need to say, but also like it's my courtroom,
mhm,
and that was always my theory, just because not because it was like some power trip or anything.
mhm,
It was because that's how you maintain order, right? There
mhm.
can't be a ton of cooks in the kitchen, right? Just the one.
Right.
And people had to know that I was the one that was in charge. And I think a lot of, not a lot, because a lot of judges do that already, but some judges don't do that.
Mhm,
And I think a lot of the issues that we talked about today could be handled if they do, right?
mhm.
If they do eliminate a lot of the nonsense that's going on.
Everyone's saying that these judges should be educated in, narcissism and parental alienation, and some people are saying they don't need to be educated, they already know this stuff, they're just letting it happen.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think.
Well, here's the thing. When you're a judge, you have to, just like attorneys have to go through and do, they call it continuing education, right?
Mhm,
Continuing legal education. For judges, it's continuing ed or judge school or whatever you want to call it. Um, and when they do that, they are usually like a lot of it is like basic refreshers, but then there's other stuff that you learn that are like current issues, and
mhm,
they're not all based on the law. Like for example, one of the last one of the last judge schools that I went to, one of the speakers that was there um talked about like transgendered people and things like that, right? Which again,
mhm,
it's important for judges to like, because not every judge, like you figure, even in one state, like there's so many different areas in one state. Like there's rural and urban and big cities and smaller towns, and so you can't assume that everybody understands like the way the world, like what's going on in the world right now, right?
mhm,
Different political backgrounds, different ideologies and virtues and beliefs, right?
mhm,
And the thing is a lot of that stuff you can't you can't bring to the bench,
mhm,
right? You can't make decisions based on that. But you do need to be educated on issues like that so that you can appreciate and understand where the person is coming from.
mhm,
And I never, I only went, I had to do it every year. So I only went, what, 5 times. I never talked about narcissism or,
mhm.
reactive abuse or anything like that. So my point is, yes, they should be educated, and it would not be that difficult to work those topics in to the education that is already required of the judge,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, I think they should be educated in it.
Now, some of them are old. I mean,
Yeah,
and,
most of them.
yeah, I was trying to be nice.
Yeah,
Um, and I heard there's hope because there's these younger judges coming up that know maybe, have grasped parental alienation, have grasped coercive control and things like that, and domestic
yeah,
violence, and maybe will rule more effectively than this old judge, I'm sorry to say.
yeah. No, I think that's a good point, and I think that's correct. And I think, you know, in any area of the government, I think there needs to be turnover,
Mhm,
right? Because I think that if you give someone power for too long, then they start doing things to protect their job as opposed to protecting the people that they work for.
mhm,
And that happens, that can be an issue, bigger issue in court, because a lot of the times you have these judges who are, in there for life.
mhm,
Some areas of politics, you can only be in there for certain amounts of time or to a certain age. But in some areas of the country, you can be as old as you want and be a judge. And I
mhm,
don't think that's ever like when I was on the bench, the issue came up for vote in our state, and I wasn't in favor of uh, allowing judges to stay longer. I can't remember the exact number. I want to say it was like 70. And I
mhm,
think the issue is whether or not they should have mandatory retirement in 70. And I was at 70 and I was in favor of it. And a
mhm,
lot of the judges looked at me like, oh, no, that's going to like eliminate, but no, you're not there. You're not there to collect the paycheck. Like, I mean,
mhm,
obviously that's your job. You have to feed your family and you have to live your life. But like the main thing is to serve the people that you're serving.
mhm,
And if nobody's going to tell me that like a judge who has been on the bench for 40 years is going to be more effective than some young blood who is more in tune with the values and the way things work in the world,
mhm,
right? Now that's not to say we should open it up for like super young people either,
mhm,
but yeah, I think the turnover is certainly beneficial for various reasons, and especially the reasons that you're talking about.
mhm. Now these judges that are elected, a lot of the, taxpayers don't know what's really going on in these courtrooms, where there's some shady business going on, collusion, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I just think if the taxpayer only knew where
Yeah,
and how their money is being spent in destroying children's lives, parents' lives, I have no words.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's like that in every area of government, right?
Mm,
There's a lot of nonsense that goes on, and it's not, contrary to what a lot of people believe, it's not just one party or the other party.
mhm,
It's just the slime of it all.
mhm.
Um, yeah, and judges aren't immune from that. A lot of
Mhm,
them would like you to think that they are,
mhm,
but they aren't, and nor should they be, right?
mhm. Right. Well, I don't wanna keep you on too much longer, so I'm so glad you popped onto the show, and
Yeah.
this was great. I totally appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay. Hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. And please join us again in the future, hopefully with Judge Anthony and other exciting guests. Thank you.
Thank you.